Francis, I mean, look, guys, it's the hottest topic we got out there, right? And I'd really like to put a bow on it and wrap this up. I truly would. So perhaps maybe we could do one final piece on Francis, and we'll just give a prediction of what comes next. Francis, today on Ariel's program, said that the next thing he's going to do is going to be boxing. It's going to be in July. All right. You have something of real interest here. Francis had said, right? Francis has some kind of a principle. He has something here, and you could tell by his contentness. You could tell by his politeness. He even thanked the UFC. He had a beautiful look on his face. He didn't look angry at all. This wasn't an actor. This wasn't a performance. This wasn't somebody in a stressful situation that's not going to let you see him sweat. He really was content. He really was in a good place. Now, I predict for you that is misguided. I would predict for you that since this announcement came, his phone has been ringing off the hook. I would predict for you that it would appear to Francis as though opportunity aplenty. That's what I would predict. Now, I don't know that Francis has been down this road. I mean, the way this works is anybody with a promoter's license that can get your phone number comes to you and starts to say stupid things. And they would really like to then go to their social media and let the world know that these things have been said and have you either like it, retweet with a comment, or just as good, not deny it. And you're not going to deny something if a guy is presenting himself that he's about to be your boss, he's about to be your promoter. He throws a big number out there of $10 million. Well, that's the number. That's the one you wanted to hear. Now, you don't know enough about this to know that he has no distribution. He doesn't have a promoter's license. He's got no opponent. He's got no sponsors. He has nothing in place to make any of those things happen, but you don't know that. And you really didn't give him enough time to vet him because your phone's going. You got another guy you got to call. And you got another guy that you got to text. And every now and then, mixed in that shuffle of these new leeches, you do have a real guy. You get 7 messages, 6 of them are leeches, but one of them says Scott Coker. Go, oh, all right. Well, I know he's real. I know his money's good. You get 5 more messages about who knows what, and then you got one from Mike Gogan. And you go, oh. Well, I know that's good. I know that that's legit. And you just start to assume the rest are too. Now, I say that because it takes a couple of days. I say that because Francis really did look very pleased with where he was at. I say it because I'm not sure that he's aware of how to go about these deals. And I understand that boxing is where he wants to be, but you got to understand in boxing, okay? You got a guy that was outstruck in his last fight. That's just the truth. Cyril Gane outstruck him. You got a guy that has a knee injury. You got a guy that's an unknown age of at least 36 years old. And you got a guy that's over 300 pounds. Like, this isn't what the world is claiming. That's just not. If you're Tyson Fury and you go beat up a guy who's never done this before, who's coming off a knee injury, who's over the weight limit, you got to have something that Tyson could use. And you did when you had the UFC Championship, and now you don't. So I'm just sharing for you. Like, sometimes you have to know these things. You have to know these things about yourself. You're thinking I'm going to make my great big home run in pay-per-view, but you personally had audit rights, and you know how good you are at pay-per-views. But okay, this is still the hope, right? Nobody gets to be rich in this business if they don't get a cut of the pay-per-view. So fair enough, we're going to go in the pay-per-view business. Well, that kind of just narrowed us down, didn't it? I mean, that kind of just narrowed down who we could even go and work with. There's an MMA organization that's doing pay-per-view that isn't called the UFC. And there's a lot of boxing organizations, but who are we going to do this with? And how good are those numbers really? What kind of a realistic number can I have? Chuck and Tito were doing something, not even a third time. They had a very good frame of reference for how that was going to do, but it didn't. And it's just one of those situations where you could do very well in life taking those risks. Very, very well. But there was a comment made by Francis that he doesn't want to be told no, that he really wants to pursue something. He wants to see how great he could be. Now, that is something that I can get behind. I didn't know that's what we were doing. That was refreshing to me. I've always thought this was about the money. I've always thought it was about the money. I guess maybe I misunderstood. Because if this is about competition, you now have my attention. But if you want to see how far you can go in the sport of boxing, how are you going to do that? It's not how boxing's done. Unless, of course, you're preparing for Paris in 2024, which nobody could keep you out of, including the UFC. You could be signed to the UFC and you still have the right to pursue Olympic sport. I don't know that Francis wants to go and pursue Olympic sport, but I'm sharing with you, he said that he wanted to see how far it can go. The only way you can know how far you can go is to get into a competitive architecture that is respected, and with Paris of 2024 coming up, it actually could work out just nice. If that is, in fact, what you want to do. Now, if you want to just go make some money and you want to have a one-off and you want to have one of these experiences, that's okay too. That's what I've always thought that we were doing here. You're never going to know how far you are. Does it sound as though you're willing to fight a reasonable opponent for somebody who's at least 36 years old and has never done this? It doesn't seem like that. Maybe that's exactly what it is. And the more I hear, and I got to tell you this, the more that I hear about frustrations within that contract, the more I believe he didn't understand that contract. There's not very many things that you can't do per that contract. Now, if you choose to read it that way and you choose to see it that way, and you choose to go by somebody else's interpretation of it, I could see how you could come to that conclusion. Now, that's a conversation for another day. I just feel that Francis is going to be back. I don't think his time in the UFC is done. Francis went out like a gentleman today with thank yous and with beautiful things to say. Jon Jones went out, and if he could have burned the UFC down, he would have. If he had that ability to burn it to the ground, he would have. He's back with a raise in a world title fight. So, I mean, what a difference a day makes. If Jon could do that after three, why could Francis not do that? And the Francis story isn't done. Now, if Jon Jones goes and kicks Surreal's ass, the Francis story is done. But if Surreal somehow gets the jump on Jon, it just makes Francis bigger. And that's just something that we do in this sport. Just one of the many things that are almost unexplainable and most certainly not fair. But it is a reality, and it would provide an opportunity. And Francis definitely could come right on back. So you got some pretty tough predictions there. This is about seeing how far you can go when you don't want to be held back. Okay, great. One way to do that, Paris 2024. I don't think that's the conversation we're having, but if we are, please let me know now, because you could have done that with the contract the way it is. And if somebody told you that you couldn't, they were wrong. I've really yet to hear anything that they wanted to achieve that wasn't already allowed in that contract. Now, I have heard other people try to give an interpretation of that contract that will tell you to the contrary, and because that guy's got on a fancy suit and he's got a pretty good tone in his voice, you tend to believe that he was true. You tended to believe that it was right. Francis can still come back. If Henry Cejudo can walk away as a co-main eventer and walk right back into a world championship, if Jon Jones can walk away wanting to burn the organization down, if he knew how, he would have done it. He could go back into a world title fight. Do you know what it'd be like to try to win a world title? I mean, do you know how hard that is to do? But now let me give you a scenario. The champion is out. For the first time in company history, there's not a Division I All-American amongst them. The one guy that could beat you all is wearing a suit and a headset sitting right there. And a kickboxer that's 1-1 in his last 2 fights is going to be your opponent. I mean, that world title sounds a little bit different than most world titles. Doesn't it?